conversation. We told you earlier that it looks like government is advocating or is already starting a journey to have some sweeping reforms across public universities in Ghana. And already there's a draft bill that has been put before the academia in our country for public universities. It would also ensure that at least members of council, currently numbering, at least for the University of Ghana, a number of the public universities, around 15, to be whittled down to 9. And of course, we'll try and have some conversation on the subject. We'll speak to Dr. Apj Ichia, and he's with the Law Faculty of the University of Ghana, if we can. But our mainstream conversation for this morning is also on the Impasse on the campus of the University of Education, Winneba. And we know that school is expected to reopen today, and by tomorrow, academic work should fully begin. But what a way to begin the conversation and have the right people do the conversation as well. And we have Dr. Duku here, and he has been instrumental in many of the conversation around this, and he's also with the UTAC chapter of the University of Education, Winneba, one of the 3 who are expected to be reinstated. And he's here. Good morning to you.
Good morning, sir.
And we also have here the Member of Parliament for Busa South, but also a Deputy Ranking Member for the Education Committee of Parliament, Dr. Clement Apak himself, somebody who is closely associated with UTAC because he's a former lecturer. Talk to him severally. And thank you again for passing through the studio this morning. Saluna. Well, but let me start with you, Dr. Duku. Yeah. There is already a formal statement that we have read in the press, widely published, indicating that 3 of you, of course including you, should be reinstated. What sort of communication have you received from the management of the university in relation to that?
Okay. Good morning to our listeners, and good morning to Honorable. I think we also heard it from the media. As you could see from the individuals copied on the press release, UTAG was not copied. And even GRASAC president on a council was also not copied. So you could see that those letters were not intended to be given to the concerned individuals. And we have not, since the release of that statement, received any official notification that this is a decision of council, and therefore we can resume our duties. We have not received any formal communication.
That's surprising. You and how many other? 2 others?
Yes, 2 others. We have all not been given any official letter. Remember, we were dismissed by official communication from the university, which was a communique through the Vice Chancellor. He signed. And it's expected that if we are going to be reinstated, then officially they have to also inform us through the same channel.
No. But that's surprising.
Yes. Roland, let me say good morning to you. Good morning to Doc here, and then good morning to my constituents who are watching my post-ministry. It is very strange. It is not just surprising, but it is strange. Because one would have thought that given how far we have come, and given how, if you like, persistent this impasse has been, even when, council decides to reverse a decision that was earlier made, which of course led to the student revolt, which resulted in the closure of the institution, one would have thought that not just a press statement in the media, but at least, as Dr. Duku said, there would have been formal communication, because you don't resolve these issues by statements in the media. As he's saying, although publicly, the impression we all have, and up until now, was that, they had been reinstated. He is telling us that they have not received any formal communication beyond what we have all become aware of in the media. And that raises a lot of issues. I mean, what could account for that? What could be the reason why council would announce publicly that the decision has been reversed and that they are being reinstated, and yet has not formally communicated to the persons whom it seeks to reinstate. Is it the case that council is perhaps lagging behind, or perhaps it's not even serious about what it put in the public domain? I mean, we need to be serious. I mean, when we make decisions, we should give effect to them. It's not sufficient to say that they have been reinstated, and yet you have failed to formally communicate to them. When you do this, it gives room for a lot more speculation, and for people then to proffer their own interpretations about what is going on. You know, others could even argue whether maybe it's not even a ploy to get students to calm down, to come back to school, because the reason for which the school was closed down, which was the student revolt, because they thought their lecturers, 3 of their lecturers, among many others, had not been fairly treated, and that they were unjustifiably dismissed, is still present as we speak, because he can't confirm that he has received any formal communication, and this has implications.
Have you had some form of interaction or communication with the 2 others alongside you who are expected, per the statement that has been published by the media, to be reinstated?
Yeah, I'm constantly in touch with them.
Okay, so what's the feedback?
They have also not received any letter, and we have a belief that if whatever was put out to the public was the correct information, then it was rather unfortunate that the UEW petitioned the council listing all affected individuals, 23 of us. So what was the reason that accounted for reinstatement of only 3 of them? We believe that the rest were also illegally dismissed, and the same channel or processes that was used in reinstating the 3 should have also been expanded to cover the other 20 as well. That is our belief.
There's a publication here, and it follows an interaction we had with one Bauer, and he says he speaks for the University Council and its management, and subsequently he seems to be indicating that the 3 seem to be, including you, seem to be the only personalities in this whole impasse who need to be reinstated, more so because there have been adduced evidences of wrongdoings for the other related individuals in all these. That would be 20, according to your number.
It's rather unfortunate if that was from Bauer, because if a principal of a college who is a council member who sits on academic board cannot speak for the university, how can Bauer speak for the university, let alone the council? I don't know where Bauer had the information from, but from the information we have, it's possible that everybody should be reinstated. What are the reasons for dismissing? Somebody is supposed to go for renewal of his appointment. The HOD declares him that you have to renew his appointment. The dean declares him. Then it gets to appointment and promotion board, and somebody says, I can't work with you, and therefore you are not going to be renewed. The appointment is not going to be renewed. Is there a tangible reason for dismissing individuals? Now, somebody receives text message, a WhatsApp message from a group that they have created about something. Then he forwards to share with other members. You call that one unprofessional, and you dismiss the person. Now, a committee is set by a council, and that committee recommends that 2 individuals, for instance, Senna and Jimmy, is supposed to be retrained. However, you go ahead to dismiss them. So where did we get this information or this desire to be sacking on will and desires as it moves on? So I believe that if Bauer, really, I don't believe Bauer can speak for the council because he doesn't have that locus nor the autonomy, or the authority to speak for council. However, we believe that the reinstatement of the 3 is perhaps a mere window dressing to give an indication that everything is calm on the ground, which is not. It is.
Because if the 20 others are supposed to be added to you, to the 3 who are supposed to be reinstated, it would mean that they may have been cleared, or a decision has been made by council or the management of the university to rescind the earlier decision. And that doesn't seem to be the indication so far. So
that was what we were expecting. We initially heard that they formed a 3-man committee or a 3-member committee to look at the issues. However, we were later on told that 2 of them rescind in joining the committee. And therefore, if the council felt, because it was a condition we had that those individuals affected should be reinstated before the reopening of the school. And today the students are coming. What do we expect the students to do? Because we had the convention per the communication that came from Honorable Afenyo Makin and Honorable Kennedy Japon through or from the Minister of Education that has been the agreement they have reached with council, and that every affected member was going to be reinstated. So if council called a meeting to discuss this and they decide that, okay, because these 3 individuals' dismissal led to the route and the closure of the school, and therefore we should bring them, as if the others do not have a genuine case to be reinstated. We believe strongly, per their own letters issued to the candidates or those affected individuals, we believe they have a case to be brought back.
But what would they have to seek some redress, especially you coming with your experience and also from the Committee of Education?
Well, it's very clear that the issue is far from over, and I've had a chance to have this conversation with you. It is very deep-seated, and it is as though, you know, we are trying to whitewash it. It is a very deep-seated impasse that can only be resolved if we take this matter very seriously. To be honest, I would have wished that the Parliamentary Subcommittee on Education would have done a lot more on this matter. The process had begun where the decision was made to engage the different stakeholders in as far as the UEW campus is concerned. So, for example, Dr. Duku here and his other colleague appeared before the committee on behalf of UTAG, and they presented their side of the case. Now, what should have happened was for the other groups to also appear in terms of management, council, the student representatives, the union reps, so that we could perhaps help fashion a solution. But even so, some of us are very clear in our minds about how this came to be and what needs to be done to resolve it. It is that simple. Processes and procedures, and as far as the governance of an institution of that nature, have clearly been violated. And that is where the issue is. I have argued severally that even the process of removing or selecting the current Vice Chancellor in itself is a problem. If the right processes and procedures were followed, in the case of advertising a vacant position, putting together the search committee, allowing those who qualify to put in their applications, the processes of winnowing goes through.
As stated by the Act.
Yes, by the university statute. If that was to be done, I believe that where we are, we wouldn't even be here. But even so, in spite of the fact that proper processes and procedures were not followed by all standards, the expectation was that the new management and leadership would have adopted a reconciliatory posture to bring all on board, even as the president said during the investiture of the current Vice Chancellor. But what is evident is that the opposite has been done. And many of these persons who have been dismissed or demoted, you know, if you go and you analyze the reasons, Roland, seriously, a lot of them cannot be justified. It cannot be possible to dismiss people for the reasons that are being exhibited to justify such dismissals. We all know processes and procedure, but it is simple. The perception has festered on that any and everyone who seeks to challenge what is going on now under the dispensation of Professor Afo Bruni, you must be necessarily a sympathizer of the advocate management, and therefore you have to be dealt with. And this is why there is the blatant disregard for the rules and regulations. And in as far as this continues, it is going to be difficult for this issue to be resolved in a way that can create the needed atmosphere for teaching and learning to prevail, because they would also fight for their rights. Every single person has a right, and if they feel aggrieved that the employer, in this case represented by management as in council, has not treated them well, they would have a reason to seek redress. And if their students feel strongly, as they did before, that lecturers are not being fairly treated and that they are being targeted in ways that is even detrimental to their own interests, the students are going to side with their lecturers, and then the impasse continues as it is.
So, since you're the chapter president for UTAG, what's the position of the entire UTAG nationally?
I think when the information came out, we communicated it to National. And National has been in talk with management and the council to see how best we can redress this without further route or whatever on campuses. And they have tried their best. But you see, sometimes you have faith in somebody through the words that the person gives you, and it turns out to be the opposite. It gives you that kind of impression that there's an element of mistrust, and therefore it doesn't give you the hope that next time you can believe the person by words anymore. So this is where we are, because what we were made to believe was that all those affected individuals were going to be reinstated before reopening. So it came to us as a surprise when only 3 have been selected out of the group to be reinstated. And as to when the rest will be called, no one knows. And for instance, as the school has reopened today, are we now also expecting the departments whose lecturers are not brought back to also go for a demonstration before you reinstate their lecturers? Because, for instance, Harper's art education and languages demonstrated, and their lecturers have been reinstated. The others did not. So are we this time also expecting them to go onto the street? So we could have used the same process in reinstating this to cover the rest, so that at the end of the day, once the school reopens today, we can have that kind of harmonious atmosphere to go about our lawful duties.
And Roland, I think I must agree with Doc, but you see, it also then throws at the issue of political interference. Now, when this issue came, we are not even going to go back to the genesis, but even if we were to take it from the point where the students rose after he and his 2 other colleagues were made go, the politicians who were on that campus, the kinds of language that they used, the impression that they gave, UTAG and the rest of them, including Dr. Duku and Professor Avia and the rest of them, were very certain in their minds that indeed
they've come to a certain consensus.
The utterances made by Canadian Japan and Afenyo Maken were indeed utterances communicated or conveyed to them by a higher authority, in this case, the minister. So having told them that the agreement was that council would initiate the processes of reinstating all of them, they said all, who had been dismissed. They believed in that, and that was the expectation. So now that council has chosen to only publicly state that only the 3 are going to be reinstated, that is the question he is now posing. What happens to the rest of them? And what happens if the students of the others also then decide that, oh, it is because the students of the other lecturers rose up, that is why they have been reinstated, and therefore that is the only option available to us to also rise up to get our lecturers reinstated. Is the campus going to be peaceful? It is not going to be. So I think that we need clarity about who said what to who, and that is part of the confusion. Because now people are even raising questions about the locus of my 2 colleagues as to whether they had the capacity to even make statements that gave an assurance to the aggrieved parties. And yet, as we speak, the ministry or the minister has not come out publicly to clarify the issue. So in some ways, there is still some level of ambiguity regarding what information was communicated and whether the source of that information is truly what we were made to believe.
But there seems to have been an element of trust and some confidence building following the interventions by the 2 political
rightly so. But you see,
individuals.
Rightly so. What they did, from my own understanding, was welcoming news to the aggrieved students and indeed the lecturers, because they trusted and they believed that given where they were coming from, they certainly could not have just come to tell them a story that was untrue. But now that we are where we are, it is beginning to be doubtful as to whether what they communicated is indeed what they were told to communicate, or even if what they communicated had any basis, and whether or not they had that backroom agreement with council. Because council's act, as of now, certainly does not confirm what the 2 members of parliament communicated to the aggrieved students and UTAG. And that is
the posture is at variance to what?
Exactly.
Yes.
And that is very confusing. It is not helpful to any of us.
Now, you the 3, or you as leader of UTAG on campus, and also as one of the integral aggrieved persons, have you been able to make some form of gesture towards the leadership of the school and also the Ministry of Education in relation to the announcement that has been made about your reinstatement into the university?
Roland, I might be truthful with you. The kind of culture we have built in that institution now is very difficult to do that inter-grouping communication.
I don't get you.
What I mean is that even if you look at the kind of communication that came from some members of UTAG from our local branch, when National wanted to support the cause of reinstating the affected individuals, some members of our fraternity, the UTAG, said National rather should back off, and they were calling for the head of the national president. Why will an association whose members have more or less been illegally dismissed will now want to side with management? I've never seen this before.
But it also means that as far as the local chapter is concerned, you're divided among yourselves.
We got divided from one. And this is part of an administrative rule for, to me, those who don't have the strength to manage all. So you divide and rule. So whilst you are managing few, the others are even fighting among themselves. So there won't be any kind of cohesion between the associations to fight you if you were going wrong. As I speak with you, we don't have leadership for the alumni. We don't have leadership for the SRC. The SRC leadership that they claim to have are all acting. Which were appointed by the current vice chancellor.
Well, the students have confirmed that.
Yes.
They claim they have no confidence in the SRC leadership.
Yes. So this was the mindset and the schemes that were brought. You can remember even UTAG 1 was sent to court, and the Winneba High Court ruled in favor of those that took me to court that we didn't use the normal procedure in doing the election until I took it back to Cape Coast Appeal Court for that to be quashed. So for 1.5 years, UTAG UEW had never had that leadership because I was there and I couldn't function because there was a court injunction on me. So that has been the scheme practiced all this while, that you have to divide the unions and make sure that they don't function, so that if there's anything going wrong, they can't oppose you. And therefore, I wasn't surprised, though, that few members of our group came out with that statement and purported to be the mouthpiece or the speech for majority.
Well, but my point is that it still shows that you have a divided front.
Yes, we do. And moving on, we are going to see how best we heal that. Because what it is now, is getting to more or less appointment time. So people now want to speak so that they can be heard, and maybe they'll be rewarded with appointment. For instance, those that took me to court, I contested with 4 individuals. They took me to court. Out of all the 4 have been given positions, either their deans or their vice deans or their HOD. So if somebody is also sitting there, next time he also wants to speak, so that at least... So
you're surmising some form of conspiracy theories at the end
I can perceive that. That is what is being practiced.
But you still haven't answered my question about whether you have made, on your part, that gesture of also trying to make some contact to the leadership.
That's why I told you.
It's also critical in all
It's
this.
difficult to communicate now directly.
Why is that?
Because they will never listen to you. Just like Bawa is now speaking on behalf of council. Whom are you speaking to? When we officially wrote, when this incident happened, and we officially wrote through council to council that the affected members were supposed to be reinstated. Do you know how they treated our letter? They made photocopies and gave it to the media that were around on that day. And as we speak with you, over a month, they have not responded to that letter. So what is the guarantee that the next time you seek audience, they will respond to that? So what we've been doing, though, is to communicate to them through the national. So what if we have any grievance, we now tell national, and national can communicate and they give us the feedback. But indirectly, we've not been able to do that.
According to your statutes, if you take a look at your statutes, the composition of the council and subsequently will still rest on the executive president making choices for various members. That is legitimate.
It is. Since the establishment of this institution over 27 years ago, we've never had this kind of issues in UEW before. Never. All this happened not because of the nomination from government, but because of the individuals who were nominated and their interest to serve themselves rather than the institution. Let's look at the council chairman, and I'm sure you've heard so many things about him. Somebody who was denied a promotion because he did not meet the minimum criteria, now came back, changed the rules, and promoted himself. We have another council member who is a lawyer, who now also speaks on behalf of the council. All those that were representing unions and that were speaking independently or for the unions in one way or the other have been sacked. Dr. Bekwen got sacked because he was representing convocation and he spoke his mind wherever he felt things were not right. Dr. Sapong got dismissed. Professor Avia got dismissed. And there's one, Professor Michel in Kumasi, who also spoke his mind, but because he knew the terrain, when his term ended, he decided not to go for re-election. So all those, and for instance, Professor Salufu from NCT no longer attends their meeting because he believes that they will not give him the opportunity to express his view. That is not how we build consensus in that platform, higher body of the institution. It's not that way.
Dr. Pa, it looks like, looking at the posture of not only him as president of the UEW UTAC chapter, but also the other two who are supposed to be reinstated, they can't seem to make that gesture towards the council and the management of the university. But who should do that? I think that there need to be some a middle level ground and somebody playing the referee's role.
Well, rightly so. But you see, that in itself, you know, allows us to understand how deep this impasse is. To think that they are all on the same campus and yet there's this level of suspicion where they cannot even directly engage, in itself presents us with a challenge. Now, ideally, as I said, you know, the communication would be done through them, but on their behalf by UTAG, because, you know, it is their union which came to their defense in all of these matters. And indeed, if you remember, UTAG did a very, I would say, robust press conference where they outlined in detail what the issues were, where the challenges were, and they even proposed ways to address that. So I would think that the channel of communication has to be through UTAG. But you can't fault them, because as the saying goes, he who feels it knows it. They are there, and they know the level of distrust. And indeed, recent developments have not given them any reason to believe that, you know, at least both sides are giving each other the benefit of the doubt. And case in point is even the fact that we were all made to believe that they are being reinstated, and yet they don't have any form of communication to that effect. So when you do that, I mean, how do you expect them to reach out when you make public statements and you let the public believe that you are going to take a certain type of action, and yet where you are to give that pronouncement effect, you are failing to give it effect? That in itself does not engender trust. So the one big issue that I believe also is militating against a much more quick and immediate resolution to this impasse is the lack of trust. And so where do we go? Do we need an external entity to try and broker and work through to ensure that the right things are done? And in my opinion, that those who have been dismissed are reinstated, and that the proper processes be invoked, and that all the other issues that have come up as a result of the current impasse are also looked at. Because some of them, you can't just wish them away. I mean, he just gave the example of the council chair going on retirement as an associate professor, coming back as council chair, and then suddenly the rules are changed to allow him to qualify after almost about 5 years. I mean, some of these issues, you can't just wish them away, because this is an academic institution, an institution of higher learning. There are standards, there are processes, there are procedures, and there are expectations. And that is why it is most unfortunate that we are seeing the blatant disregard for rules and regulations and processes. And without those, we should as well declare ourselves a jungle nation. The rules must be followed. And the students must get the right example from the institutional heads who are mentoring them, that they know how to follow rules and regulations, that people cannot be penalized for divergent opinions. People are going to be rewarded based on merit and hard work, and not because they don't toe one political interest or the other. I mean, if we were to allow this to continue, what type of society are we building? What examples are we giving to those we all believe are going to take over from us? But talking about intervention, I truly believe that the ministry has to be very clear in terms of who is responsible for what, and whether or not the communication that was conveyed to members of UTAG and also used to calm the students down on that fateful day was legitimate and authentic, and where it came from. Because the confusion around who said what and who has what capacity to act in which way is not very helpful. But ultimately, the Parliamentary Subcommittee on Education, I would say, we have been rather too slow in playing our role in helping to find a resolution to this matter.
Has this action, as it came before you, have you had some deep-seated conversation with any of the parties, and what has been some of the responses so far? Because
well, so far it is only the UTAG reps who have appeared, and that is why I think that it is rather a bit too slow. Because
but not representative from council
not yet,
management.
not yet, and I'm hoping that the leadership of the committee would activate that so that we can also play our role. We have a role to play.
Very good.
If not, the students and the lecturers and the good people of this country, they wouldn't forgive us. We have a responsibility to even bring the minister.
Yeah, Dr. Park, are you already familiar with the Public Investors Bill 2019?
It hasn't come to Parliament yet.
But have you cited it?
Tabled yet.
Have you cited the
draft? I have heard of it.
That's been circulated.
It is. I have heard of it, but I'm yet to scrutinize it. But from the snippets that I am picking up, it doesn't look like it is going to be something that academia would be amenable to accepting.
Yeah.
I mean, given what I know and some of the things that I am hearing, clearly the commentary is that it impinges, if you like, it is going to suffocate academic freedom.
We'll seek your opinion on it after we've spoken to Professor Apiejetia, who is with the Law Faculty University of Ghana. But let me just run this by before we wrap up on this discussion on the UEW Impasse. I had some interaction with one or two individuals in the opposing group as well, who are in, of course, council and management. And for their argument, they said that some number, if not a greater number of the 23, as you cited, and the rest of the 20 now who are there, may have breached certain disciplinary rules. And if you go to Schedule C of your statute, they use well laid out regulations to be able to dismiss them, go through investigation and some findings, and ultimately dismiss them. And if you go to Schedule G, it's there on the disciplinary rules.
I'm glad you have referred to our statutes.
Yes.
Because
it was referred to me at the time too.
Of course. In my case, for instance, they refer to the statutes. Of course, within the statutes, you can have everything that you want to do and link it to the statutes. If we wanted to respect the statutes, why didn't we use the statutes in appointing the current Vice-Chancellor? Because per the statutes, whoever becomes a Vice-Chancellor at least should serve a minimum of 4 years. And as at the time of his appointment, he was 58. He couldn't have served that four-year term. So it means he automatically did not qualify. Beyond that, the selection or appointment of a Vice-Chancellor is not something that is done within a week. It goes through a process. There must be a set committee which is enshrined within this status. Why was that avoided? So why at a point do you want us to refer to the status, and when it gets to another point, you don't want us to refer to the status? And as I did indicate, if we look at this came from them, the Fight Funding Committee. The committee recommended that some individuals were supposed to be retrained. And yet, when those individuals were being dismissed, they find solitude within this statutes to back their...
Well, regulation is regulation, law is law.
So, that's it.
All right, just wait here. Let me also get onto that mainstream discussion on the Public Investors Bill 2019. It's not being sent to Parliament yet, but of course it's before academia, and various professors and teachers and members of our universities are supposed to make inputs. But there have been some concerns. The concerns are that it looks like government or the executive wants some sweeping reforms to public university education in our country. But on the other hand, it's raised some concerns among leaders in academia about the the concerns over some regulation intended by government, if not the executive, on the way universities are run and ultimately could affect academic freedom. We have Professor Apiejetua. He is with the Law Faculty of the University of Ghana. He's on the line. He's a main speaking spokesperson on this subject. Good morning to you, Professor Apiejetua.
Good morning, Roland. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. Now, the Public Universities Bill, can you just itemize some of the points, especially sections within the bill for which you have concerns as academicians?
Well, the bill raises some interesting innovations, some of which are positive, some of which are negative. But I must say, in our opinion, the negatives outweigh the positive. One positive is that it is bringing one law which will regulate all public universities, which is a good thing. But then also another negative positive in the sense that it recognizes some level of autonomy for the university with respect to the individual teachers of the university. Apart from that, the provision as it stands will severely compromise academic freedom of the universities if it's enacted in the form it is now. And for us, among the concerns is with particular reference to the constitution and composition of the University Council, which is the main governing body of the university. If you look at most statutes of the public universities, and taking particularly the University of Ghana, for example, the membership is quite broad. It's about 15 or so members, which includes certain unions of the university, the vice chancellor, the chancellor, pro-vice chancellor, and the UTAC, for example, is a prominent member on the board. Even for the students, they have 2 unions which are represented. But the current bill that we have is made up of a 9-member body, and most of them have derive their representation on the council through the government. And we don't think that is a good idea, because one of the basic tenets of academic freedom for the university with respect to governance of the university, and a prominent role is carved out for particularly university teachers. According to a particular UNESCO document, about 50% of the position should be occupied by the University Teachers Association. But here, they are going to be done on a rotational basis with other unions of the university, which in itself is not very clear, but it looks as if one union is on the council for one term, then the next term another union will take over, and that is not good enough. There is also concerns about the fact that the Minister for Education, for example, is giving some broad powers to make some regulation. And even with the council itself, the government has the power to dissolve the council in case of an emergency, and then to set up an interim council. That is also a major flaw which the university will contest strongly, because that in itself will not give the council the freedom to operate. And in any case, the majority of the council members are going to be government appointees, and that will also compromise the university's autonomy in a serious manner. So this is among other issues that we are contesting that shouldn't be in place in the new bill.
Okay. So it is your widely held view or opinion that because a university vice chancellor shall be appointed by the council, it is possible there could be some machinations in there?
No, the university, the vice chancellor, usually the process for selecting a vice chancellor goes through the university internal procedures.
As stated in the statute.
Has been selected that it will go to council for council's endorsement of that position. But the problem is with the chancellor of the university, which is different from the vice chancellor. So the chancellor, in the case of the University of Ghana, is appointed by an electoral college, But under the current arrangement, if the bill becomes law, it is the council that will end up appointing the chancellor. And that will further compromise the independence of the council as well as the chancellor. Because the chancellor it enjoys a certain broad powers. And if at the end of the day, he's coming from or representing the government, directly or indirectly, that will compromise the independence of the university.
When you say that it's going to compromise academic freedom, that phrase, what really do you mean by that?
When you talk about academic freedom, you are talking about the independence that the university itself, the teachers of the university, the students are supposed to enjoy on the campus. And this concept of academic freedom is to enable or facilitate research, dissemination of information, finding out new knowledge, which will then be used to promote teaching and promote the well-being of the society in general. Now, this is anchored on 4 pillars. That is institutional autonomy. That the university itself should enjoy some freedom. And this freedom can only be enjoyed, for example, if there's limited governmental interference. So a situation where you have a chancellor being appointed by the president, or the president himself being the chancellor, and minister of education and so on having prominent roles to play, it compromises the institutional independence of the university. Then we have governance of the university. And here, the Teachers Association is supposed to play a prominent role in that. If that is also compromised, then it affects the institutional autonomy of the university. Then the university teachers should also enjoy individual freedoms within the university setting to allow for freedom of research, freedom to choose what courses to teach, how it should be taught, and who should be taught, and so on. Then tenure is also very important, protection of tenure, so that a teacher may not be demoted or withdrawn from the university based on his critique of the government or the university itself or the kind of research that the person is undertaking. Now, if you look at the bill in its entirety, the institutional autonomy of the university is compromised, governance is compromised, except the freedom of the individual teachers of the university. However, much as prominence is given to that particular freedom for teachers to do their research and so on, where the institutional autonomy of the university itself is compromised and governance is also compromised, it makes the freedom for the teachers more or less useless, because without the ability to engage in governance and without the university itself enjoying autonomy from the government, you cannot enjoy that freedom in a very meaningful way.
How does this measure up if you go through the content of the bill and the way it's supposed to operate, and the ministry or the minister and the appointments thereof by the executive president, and subsequently when the council is composited, the appointment they have to make and the way they have to operate? How does this measure up with some of the best practices around the world?
Well, the best practices around the world, generally, first of all, there is a correlation or relationship between the democratic credentials of a country with the academic freedom of its institutions. So the higher the democratic record of a country, the higher the respect for academic freedom. And the same metric has been used to assess academic freedom and democratic freedoms in countries. In the case of Ghana, as we stand now, we have a higher level of respect for academic freedom because the democratic credentials of the country is quite high, to the extent that in the Constitution itself, we have for the first time recognized academic freedom as among the freedoms we enjoy in Article 21. So if we now look at the bill as it is now, it brings down the marks that should be used to measure academic freedom in the country. And therefore, there is no correlation between the standard of democratic credentials that the country enjoys compared to the level of academic freedom which we enjoy. So for that matter, there is no balance, and that will therefore affect the ability of academics to perform their functions, and at the same time to affect the credibility of the government when it comes to measuring its democratic credentials and respect for human rights by any international body or international NGO.
Well, we have to let you go, but before we do so, though, you look at all the things that have gone on with KNUST, UEW. I mean, really, government and the president really is the one in charge of the way the security is supposed to be managed in our country, and also the way things are run in our country, in pursuance with our constitution. And so if the president is having the all without power for the executive to do what it likes, I think it's in consonance, don't you think?
I don't think so. Security on the campuses is regulated by the universities according to international standards. So, for example, a situation where you have police presence on the campuses is not allowed. If there is any problem on the campus, it is up to the vice chancellor to invite the police in. And so there is that rapport between the university management and the security authorities to ensure there is orderliness. Now, in case there is any disturbance on the campus and so on, the long-held practice has been what I've just prescribed. But in case it goes beyond that, then it is up to a commission of inquiry or some other body, even the University Council itself, to conduct investigations and find out what happened and how going into the future such occurrences may not take place again. So I think if you look at the KNUS situation, for example, it wasn't in the power of the government to say that we want to dissolve the council and for investigations to be held because they suspect that or they think that the council was complicit in what happened on the campus. If anything of that, if that is the thinking of the government, and therefore they base that they use as a basis to come up with a new bill which says that in case of emergency the council can be dissolved. That is going too far. So the structures are already there. The mechanisms have been in place. There have been disturbances and so on the campuses, and various measures have been used to resolve them. So this one is a drastic way of dealing with the situation, and it will, in the end, compromise academic freedom on the campus.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Appiah for speaking to us, and he is with the Law Faculty of the University of Ghana and helping us get our head around the current public universities draft bill.
Proposed. It has not come to Parliament.
Okay, the proposed.
Yes.
Yeah, but it will come ultimately. They're making inputs at that level, and I believe it's part of the consultations.
I think
and I'm sure you've gone through the initial phases.
Yes. It is normal that before government presents a bill for consideration by Parliament, you must, let stakeholders and those who are from that particular sector make an input and to look at it. So whilst we are still waiting for this to come to Parliament, I think that the red flags being raised are legitimate. I mean, I've had the chance to serve in university governance in other parts of the world. And so I know that it is very unusual what is being proposed. The example of giving the unions only one position that should be rotational. I mean, that certainly is not going to be useful. Every union is peculiar. It is different. TEU is not the same as FUSAG, and FUSAG is not the same as UTA. So to say that at every point in time, they have to take turns, quite clearly.
In commensurate with the tenure of the council.
Quite clearly, that in itself is a problem. It is going to create agitation, first of all. Secondly, it is unjustified because you are assuming that they have common issues, which is not the case. You understand? And then I think the other big one that definitely has caught the attention of many is the president being given the powers to resolve council if there's an emergency. Who defines an emergency? How do you define that? I just think that it is going way too far. And I'm getting council to appoint the chancellor. Please. I am scandalized. This doesn't happen anywhere. How can the Chancellor then have authority to dispense his roles and responsibilities, even if when that would affect council? How can he be autonomous if council is the one to appoint him? So, well, nobody is saying that it is not a good attempt, but I think that we need to scrutinize it and make sure that if it is going to come into being, it does not erode or suffocate the autonomy and independence of academia.
Already you are in massive trouble because of all these issues related with the council and the powers
So
they
he
have.
understands the need to follow rules and regulations.
Just shortly, I'll give you a minute on this.
I believe we are going to have implementational challenges because per this proposed bill, individual institutions are supposed to create their own status. So you have one law with different implementational styles. So maybe the strategies that KNUST will want to use to appoint a VC might be different from UEW, and that might create a little problem. So as we move on, I think we have to look at all this and see how best we can iron the rough edges so that we can have a very comprehensive bill that will be very acceptable for every individual.
I have to say, rather, the bill is stating the procedures are going to be the same across all public universities. So, all right, thank you very much.
Yeah, that in itself is questionable.
Well, thank you very much. I've enjoyed that discussion. I hope that we can have the impasse resolved as quickly as possible.
It's our hope.
It's your hope, huh? We've had in the studio Dr. Duku, the president for the UEW chapter of UTAG, and helping us with some discussion. Thank you for joining me.
You're welcome.
And Dr. Clementa Park is a member of Parliament for Busa South, but a deputy ranking member for Parliament's Select Committee on Education. We're taking a break. When we come back, we have many other related things for us to discuss right here on the show. Stay with us.